Alright, I'm going to continue doing this even though my friends are already making fun of me. Baleful Beasts and Eerie Creatures. This is Monster Blood by Charles Land. And we continue with the third part. Keith has set out to see a monster and now fought against his fear. If the price of a ticket was his own blood, he was willing to pay it. Okay, he said. I'll do it for science. Keith helped set up the camp cot and stretch himself out. Professor Zembeck expertly drew the ounce of blood from his arm, and though Keith had no feeling of weakness, the professor told him to lie quiet while he put away the cotton, the rubber hose, and syringe. That bright red liquid in the glass beaker was his blood, and he watched as the professor added it to the blood in the glass rooster. Seeing his own blood mix with the blood of a fowl made Keith feel strange. The professor smiled down at him. At midnight, this mix of blood will bring a basilisk back into the world. We will be famous. A shiver went through Keith. He got up from the cot. Take these, said the professor. He handed Keith the evil eye glasses. You will need them to work around the basilisk. I had 2 pairs put in modern frames. The ancient tie-on temples were hard to manage. Oh, and here is a case for them. Now you can put them in your pants pocket. Keith felt bewildered. Thanks a lot. You'll make a fine assistant. Come, I'll let you out. Keith followed the professor down the stone stairway. Through the slit window of the tower he could see a flash of orange across the sky. Professor Zembeck touched the switch by the door. The entry hall was flooded in light. He took out a ring of keys and removed one. Let yourself in when you come tomorrow after school. I can't hear this knocker from the tower room. His domed forehead shone in the light. Yes, sir. Good night. I'll see you tomorrow. Keith rode out of the grove of trees onto Circle Drive. Some cars already had their lights on. He was late for dinner. His parents were at the table when he rushed into the family room. I've got a job, he announced proudly. His father looked up. Pleased. Really? Where? Out at the Abbott Castle. His father put down his fork. Not for Professor Zembeck. Yes. I'm to help him unpack some stuff. What stuff? Jenny Hanivers. He has cartons full of them. What are they, dear? His mother asked. Fake monsters. Fishermen used to make them and sell them as curios. His mother looked concerned. Has anyone ever pointed out to you, Keith, that in the Dark Ages, monsters were really the manifestation of evil? No one ever saw one, I guess. That doesn't mean they were not used to influence the minds of men, Mrs. Vollmer said. Keith was annoyed but curious. How, he asked. By the evil eye. Superstitions about it were encouraged, and some people used it to manipulate others. Thank goodness, the evil eye is not one of our modern problems. Keith could tell that his father, too, was disturbed. Look, he said, chewing his food thoughtfully. I'm glad you have what it takes to go out and get yourself a job, but tomorrow I'll drop by and have a talk with the professor. Why? Keith demanded. Oh, there's some gossip about. Some say he's not right in the head. I'll talk to him and let you know. Okay, Keith said. I'll talk to him. That will make 2 of us, his father's voice was firm. Keith was behind schedule with his homework. He kept thinking what his father had said about the professor. Of course people would think Zembeck nuts. Folks didn't believe in old-fashioned monsters anymore. Instead, they had new ones like the abominable snowman or the Loch Ness monster or flying saucers. But at midnight there would be another monster around, and it would come to life with his blood. Keith also couldn't stop thinking of the evil eye. His mother's remarks worried him. Surely he would be protected by the Chinese glasses. But would he also be responsible for the monster's return? Would he be accountable for his blood, for what the basilisk might do? He shivered. The evil eye would be back in the world again. The monster serpent of evil. He thought about it with mounting concern. It would have his blood, with his consent. No prize was worth it. He must go and beg the professor not to bring the monster to life. The basilisk had long been forgotten. It must remain that way. At 10 o'clock, Keith shut off the light in his room and climbed into bed with his clothes on. He waited in the dark for what seemed like hours. When the luminous hand of his bedside clock pointed to 11, he heard his door being pushed open. He snorted a snore through his lips, and minutes later the light in his parents' room blacked out. For what seemed like an eternity, Keith lay waiting. When he could stand it no longer, he slipped down the hall to the back porch and opened the inner door to the garage. He rolled his bike back through the porch and onto the cement walk. Rubber tires and sneakers made no noise. Keeping to the side of the road without lights, he became a silent shadow, spinning under the trees. That was his undoing. Keith had stayed on Circle Drive because it was lined with trees, and he would be unnoticed by passing cars. But he overlooked parked cars, almost running into one. A battery of lights hit him in the face. "Where do you think you're going?" The voice was tough, authoritative, and a little amused. Keith stared into the light, blinded. "Speak up, boy," said the voice, and when the lights shut off, a police officer stood facing him. "I'm going home." Eventually. That last word was spoken under his breath. "I'll have to write you a ticket," the officer said, "for riding without lights. What's your name?" "Keith Vollmer. Address 2240 Circle Drive. It's pretty late for kids to be out. What were you doing?" "I have a job." "You better get home. Here?" "Yes, sir." Keith was on his bike and down the road before he had to answer any more questions. Luckily, Circle Drive passed the castle before it passed his own house. Circle Drive circled the town. Keith rode his bicycle up to the castle gate. With only a thin slice of moon in the sky, the castle looked bleak. There was a glow of light behind the draperies in the tower. Was he too late? Quietly, Keith laid his bike in the tall grass and started for the door. Keith fished for the key in his pocket, and the small modern lock opened silently. Keith switched on the lights. Carefully he put on the evil-eye glasses, and with the utmost caution entered the stairway. Climbing the steps one stone at a time, Keith felt his way along the wall. What had happened? Everything was quiet as a tomb. When his eyes became accustomed to the dark, he climbed, faster and faster. Reaching the red draperies, Keith carefully parted them. At that moment, an alarm clock on the workbench began to ring. A cry stuck in Keith's throat as the professor poured the blood from the glass rooster into the cock's mouth.